Hello and welcome to the Art of Being Human. I thought today I would start off by discussing kidney disease. That's one of the more difficult of the complications that you get when you're diabetic. As a matter of fact, I don't have kidney disease, so I'm glad to say that. And you could go for years not having any kidney disease, even though it's one of the most serious complications. You probably wouldn't get any idea that you had it. You wouldn't be getting any symptoms of it until you'd probably been diabetic for at least 15 years. A lot of these serious complications don't show up right away, but you see your blood circulation problems begin and get worse and worse over a period of time. They don't show up this way right away. Now, it is true that sometimes people aren't diagnosed until they're so far along in the diabetic process that they're actually having complications, and it's the complications that sent them to the doctor. And then the doctor discovers that they've been diabetic probably for years and not have even known it. And so these complications have had a chance to develop without treatment until they become so obvious that the person goes to the doctor and says, you know, I don't see as well, my vision is all blurred, I'm not using the bathroom correctly, something's wrong here, and then they discover that they're diabetic. But at any rate, a lot of people will go through life and not have any kidney disease at all. There's a vast majority of people who never get it. But if you are one of those who do get it, it is something that can be quite serious. So let me start off by showing you a group of charts I have here about the kidneys. These are just my own sketches just to show you the location. Here we have the kidneys, and the adrenal glands are on top of the kidneys. If I were to color these in, and I didn't because I thought you could see it better, I would probably have the kidneys as kind of like a rose kind of color, and the adrenals on top a yellow color. And this organ right here is the pancreas. It is behind the stomach. You can't draw in the stomach and then draw in the pancreas. The pancreas is a little toward the lower part of the stomach, but it's behind the stomach, and usually it's drawn with these little kind of circles or hashtags in it because of the fact that you have certain cells in the pancreas that produce the insulin, but not all of the pancreas produces insulin because the pancreas also produces digestive juices. So if I were to do it, the stomach would be right here, and the pancreas would be right behind it. This is the heart. These are the two kidneys, that's what we're focusing on, and then the adrenals on top. All that can become involved with the digestive process. Now, another sketch that I have of the kidneys, they're connected to the various arteries that are there, the various arteries and veins. Here are the adrenals right here. These two little tube-like things are the urethras, and they go right down to the bladder. And then the urethra here just takes the waste out of the body. So here you have the kidneys, you have on top of them the adrenal glands, you have one of the veins right here, you have the aorta, which is the main artery between them, and then, of course, you have the bladder, which would be in this area, and the urethra right here going outside of the body, and this is the way your body will eliminate. You have your adrenal glands on top. That's a much more complicated diagram, but I wanted you to see it. It gives you a general perception of the arteries and the veins that are there. Now, maybe the most important chart I have is this one. This is the kidneys, and these are the way they're kind of like a bean shaped, but not exactly. You have one on each side of your body. You have the medulla and you have the cortex. They are divided into different parts. I didn't do that with this one, but I just did that with this one. And then they go into the bladder, and then from there you go out, the waste products go out of the body. This would be a very common kind of diagram you would get in terms of the kidneys. Very, very important organs. As a diabetic, Diabetes is the leading cause of kidney disease, and you will be tested every year for something that's called microalbumin or microalbuminuria. Now, we have a chart up there. Diabetes is the leading cause of kidney disease. You are 20 times more likely to have end-stage renal disease, which is kidney failure. End-stage renal failure, and you'll be tested every year for microalbumin. And what that is that you have sometimes protein that goes into the blood instead of getting out of, instead of staying in the blood, it gets flushed out into the urine, and then you know that you have a problem with your kidneys. So let me talk to you now about nephropathy. I'm sorry. Some of these words are alike. Nephropathy is kidney disease. Neuropathy is nerve damage due to diabetes, of course. And then you have the study of neurology, which is the study of the nerves. And if you have a problem with your nerves, you go to a neurologist. They study it. But nephropathy is the disease of the kidneys, a disease of elimination from the kidneys. And ESRD is end-stage renal disease, and you have 20 times more chance of getting that if you are diabetic than if you're not. It is the same as kidney disease. It is the same as kidney failure. So 1/3 of people with type 1 and 10 to 20% of people with type 2 develop kidney disease after the first 15 years of diabetes. As I said before, sometimes it takes 15 years or so for the complications to show up. Kidney disease is one of those complications that show up after about 15 years of diabetes. I remember going to one of my doctors. He's moved on now. But I went to him, and every so often he says, you've got to have kidney failure. And I'd already done testing on the kidneys from my primary care, who said, your kidneys are okay. He says, your kidneys can't be okay. You've got to have kidney failure. I says, why? My other doctor says, I don't have kidney failure. He says, well, maybe he didn't give you the right test. How many tests do you have to take to find out if you've got a renal problem, you know? So I did the exact same test for him, because he insisted on it, as I did for the primary care, and they came out the same. I don't have kidney disease. He was so surprised. He said, after the number of years that I was diabetic, I must have some kidney failure. It's not unusual for a person after 20 years or so to develop some kidney failure, but it doesn't mean it's going to be full-fledged kidney failure, because there are 5 stages to it, which I'll be getting into in a minute. 5 stages of kidney failure, but you can be years in one stage before you go to the next stage, and you can be years in the next stage before you get to the 3rd stage. So if you have kidney failure, you may not go through all 5 of those stages. You may stay in one stage and stay there for years and years and years and not get any worse, especially if you have good control of your blood sugar. The least control you have of the blood sugar means that the complications that you have are worse. So 1/3 of people with type 1, 10 to 20% of people with type 2 develop kidney disease after 15 years of being diabetic. Now, the kidneys work in the way that they filter out toxins from your system. When you eat food, your food has to be digested, and part of it is good for your body. Eventually, all of the digested food becomes liquid, except for a small percent. Most of it becomes liquid. And that which is liquid that's good for your system goes into the bloodstream somehow. It gets absorbed in the duodenum. It gets absorbed from the stomach. It can get absorbed from the small intestine, but there will be a part of it that won't be useful to the body, and the kidneys filter that out. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Talk about never having a break. Your kidneys are filtering out toxins from your system. And what it does is it prevents anything that's poisonous or not healthy from getting into the blood. So they work 24 hours a day. And in diabetes, what happens, and I've mentioned this before, you have very tiny blood vessels called capillaries. You get these tiny blood vessels in the tips of your fingers, in the toes of your feet. You get them in the back of the eye wall. You get them in your kidneys as well. You get very, very tiny blood vessels. Now, we know that if your blood sugar is high, it's sticky. It has too much sugar in it. It's hard for it to flow through the capillaries. Sometimes it slows down. You have a circulation problem. Sometimes if you have a circulation problem, your cells will die because they're not getting blood. They're not getting nourishment. And as a result of that, you'll get tissue that's necrotic. It turns black. And that's when you start having to have amputations. Well, you can get this kind of damage in the kidneys where the kidneys can't filter. The little tiny capillaries in the kidneys cannot filter because they're damaged from the high blood sugar. And then what happens is it's not filtering out properly. You have some toxins filtered out, but not all. The other thing that happens when you have damage to the kidneys is the fact that food that is good, liquid that is good for the blood, doesn't stay in the blood like it should. And I'm talking specifically about protein. Protein is supposed to, that's good for your body, is supposed to stay in the blood. It's supposed to nourish your cells. But the kidney may not be able to process it due to the damage of the capillaries. When that happens, some of that protein goes into the urine. That's your microalbumin. So every year you will get tested to see if you have any kind of microalbumin in your kidneys, in your kidneys and in the urine where it's not supposed to be. And if they know that your kidneys are leaking protein into the urine, then your kidneys are in trouble. They're beginning to fail. And depending upon how much of the protein is in the urine, you'll be able to know what kind of a end-stage problem you're going to have with your kidney. Now, it takes, as I said, years and years and years. So the kidneys filter out. They get damaged by the blood sugar. The capillaries cannot do the filtering that they're supposed to do. And somehow the proteins that are supposed to be staying in the blood, going through the system and nourishing you, gets put into the kidney and it gets into the urine, and then you are leaking urine from your kidneys. And when they do a test, which is just a simple urine test, they can tell how much protein is in the urine, and it shouldn't be there. But sometimes it is. At that stage, what's going to happen is that your doctor is going to say that you can't have any protein in your lunches, in your dinner. You can't have protein. That means you're not going to be able to eat meat, cheeses, eggs, milk, anything that's got protein in it, you can't have. So you're on a very, very restricted diet. I imagine, I've never been there, but I imagine that what you're going to have is vegetables. And that's what it's going to be. So let's go to the next chart that I have. Okay, so I'm just going to review this. The kidney disease, nephropathy. It's a hard word to say. Capillaries get damaged with the diabetes. They cannot filter toxins. They get leaky. And protein that is supposed to be in the blood, I said on the blood, I meant to say in the blood, get leaked into the urine, and you may eventually need dialysis or a kidney transplant. And you will have symptoms, you will have a buildup of fluid, you may be sleepy, you may be tired, you may have vomiting, you may have be weak, and there are 5 stages to kidney failure. So we could go to the next one. If you, if you were a little ahead of myself here, if you have a problem with your kidneys, if you go through all of the stages, I'm going to run over what these stages are. Blood is removed from the artery. If you need dialysis, if you are having renal failure and your kidneys just can't handle it, you are going to have dialysis, or you're going to have a kidney transplant. But here are the 5 stages of kidney failure that you can go through. And I want you to remember that you can be years in one stage before you go to the next stage. So that this is a long-term process. And it may be that you can go to, say, stage 3 or stage 4 and never get to stage 5, in which case you may be able to make out fairly well. But here are the 5 stages of kidney failure. Now, stage 1, the kidneys are becoming larger than usual. They're trying to handle what they can handle, so they become enlarged, and there's more blood flow that goes through them. In stage 2, the kidneys start to show damage, and the protein now is starting to go into the urine. Stage 3, the kidneys show more damage and more protein is in the urine. This process continues. Stage 4, you have large amounts of protein in the urine. So what happens in these stages is that you get more and more and more protein in the urine. And at that point, you're not going to be able to eat protein because your kidneys just can't handle it. And there's no sense in giving it more of what it can't do. That's like asking a diabetic to eat a pound of sugar. You know, your body can't handle the sugar. You don't have enough insulin to handle the sugar. So why eat more of it? You're going to only add to the problem. So at this point, your diet's going to be pretty restricted. You may not be able to have any protein. I would imagine that most of the things you can eat would be salads, vegetables, and things like that. But you don't want to add more to the kidneys, more stress to the kidneys that it can't handle. Then when you get to stage 5, which is the last stage, the kidneys are not filtering. They can't filter. They are too damaged to filter. And so what you have to do at that point is that you have to go on dialysis, or you have to have a kidney transplant. And in dialysis, the blood is removed from an artery in the arm, it filters through a machine, and then it returns through a vein. So they are actually taking the blood out of your body, filtering it with a machine, and then returning it to your body already taken care of. But you have to do that. I mean, you might have to do that 2 or 3 times a week or more. And it may take a few hours to do it. But really, it's the only thing to keep you alive. Usually at that point, you're having symptoms, you really don't feel good at all, you're uncomfortable, you don't have any energy, and you can't go to the bathroom much because you're not getting any of the toxins out of your system. The kidneys just are not managing at all. It's a very, very serious complication. But as I said before, a lot of people never get to the point where they have that complication. Or they have it to a certain point, they get to a certain stage, 2, 3, whatever the stage is, and they stay at that stage for years and years. Now, I'm fortunate. Some people don't have complications with the kidneys. At this point, I don't either. And so I've been very, very fortunate that way. And so I kind of want to give you a little lecture here about smoking. If you are smoking, please stop. I can't tell you what to do, but smoking does terrible, terrible damage to the blood vessels, especially to the blood vessels of diabetics. And it's the damage to the blood vessels that you get that causes you not to be able to filter toxins, that causes you not to be able to have full blood supply to the organs, because remember that when you have problems with the blood vessels, if it's done by smoking, you're advancing your disease. If you have healthy blood vessels to start with and you don't smoke, then you are much better off because you can handle the stresses of having diabetes a lot better. Yeah, the blood vessels are in trouble if you're diabetic because they get damaged. And if you have smoking involved, they get much more damage, much more quickly. I don't know how many times I've had consults with doctors and they're going to ask me the same question every time I go in. Do you smoke? Well, I never have smoked. I've never had a cigarette in my mouth, and I never will. It causes immense problems for diabetics. It causes immense problems for heart patients as well, because it is so damaging to the blood vessels. And of course, if you have heart trouble, you've got problems with your blood vessels. They're clogged up. They don't flow right. They're in a different position than they were. You know, there's all kinds of problems that you have if you are a smoker, and it adds immeasurably to the illnesses that you have, and kidney disease is one of those things. So we're getting close to time, so I'm going to close it here, and the next time that we get together, we are going to do a unit on digestion, and I'm going to talk to you a lot about digestion, how it occurs, what happens, and the reason I'm going to do that is the fact that diabetes is very, very food related. Everything that you eat has to be digested. And you can have digestive problems because you can have problems with the nerves in your stomach in which your digestion isn't right, you know. So anyway, I'm going to stop it here, and we're going into digestion next time. Then I have something I want to say about gestational diabetes, Charcot's, and then we're going to go more fully into the personality changes that occurs and how you can help yourself if you are diabetic. So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.